The town of Hinton respectfully acknowledges that it is located on the First Peoples traditional lands. We recognize this traditional territory to show respect and understanding to those who walk this land since time immemorial. Today, we uphold our ongoing responsibility to work together in the spirit of the intent of the treaties with all the First Peoples and nations that call this place home. The town expresses gratitude for the opportunity to build a better community on these sacred lands for generations to come. And with that, I call the committee of the whole meeting for January 27th, 2026 to order. First is the adoption of the agenda. Administration, are there any additions or deletions?
No changes.
Council, any additions to the agenda for the evening? Seeing none, I would
Move to accept the agenda as presented.
All right, so the committee adopt the agenda as please vote now. Is carried unanimously. All right, next we have minute with council. Is there anyone registered to speak this evening?
No one registered.
Is anyone in the room that would like to speak for minute with council? Okay, seeing none, then we will move on to section 4, which is reports from administration. And item 4.1 being municipal support for healthcare, and I'll turn it over to CAO Master.
Thank you, Chair, to the committee. So this one has a long, fairly long history, although it's all been in relatively recent memory. But at one point in time, the Hinton Healthcare Foundation had approached the town just due to the lack of physicians in town and the lack of healthcare support for primary healthcare. The town had committed to $1 million in funding over a 2-year period. That agreement is coming due in July of this year. So really what we're talking about today is what happens after that concludes, and how does council want to support healthcare after that happens. So we have gone through a very lengthy stakeholder engagement process where we had asked the local physicians on their thoughts in relation to how the town could best do this. We have included results of that process in attachment 2. So looking at the options, we have come up with a number of them. Specifically, we've broken them down mainly between direct incentives or incentives that would go to the individual themselves. The other category of possible subsidies would be corporate support. So this would go to what we had envisioned being talking about clinic level supports. There is ownership options out there as well. Council had made a point that this was looking at ownership options was not something that we were interested in. This was with a decision of the previous council. And number 4, some other options that were referred to through the engagement process as, low cost, high impact, things such as exploring options for provincial advocacy, which I know council is already involved in, as well as paying and retaining daycare spots for physician families. Open to any questions that committee might have, and I'll open the floor.
All right, this is a good one. Mayor LaBerge.
I do have a question. I'm trying to understand some of these, and I must say that I puzzled over a bit. So on page 4 of 82, where it's talking 1B on there with a cash incentive, it says physicians with critical practice that provide minimum eligible. So I'm assuming the suggestion is there would be some sort of a cash incentive, but then it says a framework based on Alberta healthcare insurance plan billing. Like how could the town administer something like that? What is, and am I right in my assumption to what this suggestion is?
Yeah, so through the chair, it's a good point, because one of the things we were very concerned about is how easily any of these options are gonna be administered. We looked at that because one of the strong pieces of feedback is any municipal funding or subsidies should be tied to medically necessary care. And we look to that the Alberta Healthcare Insurance Plan as the easiest way to do it, because as of right now, the physicians have to create that report anyways to submit to it. So it's the physicians that create that report. And so, looking at, and I believe that's on a per visit basis. So that's something that's already being developed by the physicians that could be submitted to us as the municipality. We don't need to know the patient's name or anything. We just need to know number of visits, and we could base our subsidies off of that, just to ensure that whatever's being paid out is going to be medically necessary.
Councilor Nelson?
So for me, I'm still relatively new with a lot of this and still trying to understand the history, especially a lot of it is happening with the foundation and committees. And so I feel like I have knowledge gaps, so feel free to correct me or put me in my place if need be. But for me, I want us to have off-ramp options. I love that we're supporting doctors in a time that it's needed, but typically it's not municipal jurisdiction. And whatever direction we go, I want to make sure that there's off-ramping available. And it makes me nervous thinking about a 10 or 15 year, tax incentive program. When, that's something hopefully we're not dealing with long term. So that at a high level is the direction I would like to see us go, is to make sure that we have a way out over time if the problem starts to alleviate. So that's feelings, Mayor. That's good for now for me.
I agree 100%. That's not I put up my hand, but I think these supports shouldn't survive everything being able to survive. But I do have a question again, under corporate support, the non-residential faculty sound. So that's already in place, isn't it? Like, so with Aspire. Okay. With the improvements we've done in the space, they qualify. Is that not correct?
Through the chair, I don't know if they'll qualify. They would have to submit an application and meet all of the different criteria that are out there, but generally, improvements above a certain amount, yes, you can. You can be subject to non-residential. There's also other classes that wouldn't be relevant. But my thought here was that we could provide really a new class, and you can look up to 15 years through the legislation. You can tie it. Our current one is dependent on improvements above a certain number. Really what we were looking at with that option was just saying, should there be another classification that just says it's for medical clinics, and then we could specify a whole new set of eligibility to apply for that specific class of tax incentives. But I don't know the specifics of that.
I understand.
They may, and that class of tax incentives would be up to 5 years at 100%, 100%, 75 and 50, I believe. But we could look up to 15 years if we want to look at a new class.
Okay.
Put myself in queue if nobody else is in there yet. I think that I'm glad I was part of the original conversations to have a bit more, a little bit more lead time on some of these conversations, and it is a ton of recommended options, and I like them all for different reasons. I see benefit for all of them in different ways, but from being of the old guard, I think what's important is that we look at whatever decisions we're making as fair and equitable for all of our clinics. That we don't have, although we have previous correspondence and previous things, I think that what we need to do is think about, what is the term we want to go through on these things? What do we want to do for healthcare in general in Hinton in an equitable fashion across the board? And what does that look like And then the secondary piece, I think, is looking at, you know, what are we doing for the clinics, but then what are we doing in the, you know, direct incentives and things like that, that then could fund into our, I can't think, ARCH, the Attraction and Retention Committee, you know, is there other things that can be leveraged there? And I think there's a lot of different things, but certainly I think with the expiring contract that we currently have with the one medical clinic, this gives us an opportunity to move ahead in a much more uniform and clear manner across the board, and then and move ahead, but.
I guess I disagree. I mean, across the board is always a difficult thing. I think one of our jobs here is to have a look at what the community needs and satisfy that. I think, well, I mean, go for it. That's how I'm gonna govern my decision making anyhow. I think that that's an important consideration as we look at this thing, is how do all of medical services be supplied? So.
Those are done.
I'm just curious as to the difference with under options number 2 and number 3. One is directing administration to draft necessary policies and bylaws and bringing it to a future committee of the whole, and the other one is referring medical support to administration.
Sorry, these are in the options and
Yeah.
alternatives at the end of the report, 2 and 3, you said?
Mhm. Other than the quarter, by the end of quarter 2.
Oh, sorry, so number 2 is if council feels comfortable today actually selecting a few options, it'll come back to a committee of the whole meeting to take a look at some of the details in a drafted format. So if it's a tax incentive bylaw, we'd be bringing forward a draft of that. Option 3 is just, you know, we've taken a look at, you know, all the options, but we're just not ready to make a decision on how to move forward. We need a little bit more time to think about it. We need a little bit more information, whatever the case may be. So that's what option 3 is. But 2 is directing administration to bring back the drafted version of the options. So
Based on number 1.
yeah, and it's whichever options that committee selects. Option 1 is just looking at 2 specific recommendations.
Great.
Councilman Nelson?
So in June, there was a working group that was formed. Did that working group get dissolved? Did it finish what it needed to do? Because part of my headspace right now is this, anytime it comes to committee, we're having this discussion, but it's not involving a lot of the people who have a lot more information than we have. And admin has a lot of information on what the town, capital T town of Hinton can do, but it feels to me like there's whatever direction we go with this, I think we're gonna get a lot of feedback from stakeholders that says, did you guys think about this? Did you consider this? And what about that? And I'm just curious where this working group went and whether that's something that was just missed at org, or if it was actually like just, this is the end because we accomplished this, that, and the other thing.
Sure. Yeah, so it was 3 phases that they had provided their input, but they had provided their input on all of the options available. So really it's up to council to take a look at, you know, the options that might be available as along with their feedback and make a determination about how we move forward. You know, if they're, you know, if we want to look at more specifics on feedback from particular options, we can certainly do that ahead of time. But the plan for all of these as well is to work directly with the physicians or whoever we decide is eligible on drafting of the options, because there is a lot of nuances that I'm not particularly familiar with when it comes to this world, exactly how the process works behind, you know, for their industry. So the intent is that we were gonna use that work within the drafting phase as well as the input phase that you have
If I can just chime in, because I was on it, originally, this was coming back and the motion that was made was surrounding having the individual doctors be able to give private or public input on all of these items. It wasn't just making a decision. And that there would be feedback from locums and from whoever would go through. So the intent, I guess, the work was done with that group as intended, as was motioned, with the exception of that we said once we get to the stages of where council's feeling like based on that feedback, they're making decisions, there would be a bit of a review or some feedback that would kind of go back to them. So it's sort of weighing in on how did they feel the options suited them, and there was a variety of different opinions, and I think the work was really good. I mean, it was a bit surprising, I think, from my standpoint, because a lot of the things that we thought maybe were a slam dunk, like, oh, you just give this cash incentive and it works. There was a whole bunch of other things that really, were very evident that were more important, like clinic ownership and, some of the other things that were there. So I think, now it's up to us to look through and say, where do we as a fresh council see that it's appropriate to put, direct our sales, and maybe there's only a couple items in the beginning and that continues on, but it was quite a process to get the feedback and to get everybody together, those schedules and all of those type of things, but I personally feel that without us doing the work, we're not going to get more answers out of the same people. So it's our turn to do the work now. They gave us the feedback and then, we go forward. That's how I see it. If that helps.
I guess just expanding on Councillor Nelson is basically what we're talking about is I see some overall consensus information. I just don't know that, it doesn't sound like there was any feedback provided after this document went to the job positions. Okay.
No, I don't believe so, because it's up to us now to determine what we're
Right.
doing with that information. So
Okay.
once we do, then that would go back.
And that was since July 2025. Well, that's when it was dated anyway.
That would have been our meeting.
Yeah, the meeting was July 2025. Okay, so there's been no correspondence with the physicians on the administration.
through the chair, I don't know if there was additional correspondence after this. I would have to take a look at that.
Okay.
There might have been some, yeah, I'll have to confirm.
Okay.
I don't remember, to be honest, back in July.
This did come, the feedback did come back to committee, but due to some other things, it was just accepted for information to come back at a later time once there was some other things that were clarified. So it's just been stalled essentially through then till this point.
Well, let's see if we can go get some low-lying fruit, I guess, but and you're gonna have to help me with the wording here, and this will follow up. I guess in your comments, Cyril Panasic is, it seems to me that this non-residential tax incentive should be a relatively straightforward consideration. I mean, if we're gonna pull this off, I guess private capital is gonna be welcome, to say the least. So I would like to, Jen's the consensus. What I think we should do is have a look at a review of the non-residential tax incentive as it relates to medical service. That's what I would like to have a look at. And I think it should come back to the committee of the whole meeting. And I don't know what the exact words of that are, but I think that's what we should try to do.
Councilor Dunn?
What would you expect to see on this that we don't already know, or that we already received?
Well, I had asked the question of administration of, would the investment qualify? The answer was, we don't know, and there may be special considerations as it relates to medicine And so if we use that then as the precursor to get ready for something else that may come along, are there special considerations? Are there? So that's kind of the essence of my thought here. We know the investment's been made. Let's have a look and see what that. And this was put in place to say to people, take your money and invest it in Hinton. And really, this is just an extension of that discussion.
Through the chair, the only thing with this specific one is we would require an application from the owner in order to make those determinations. We have our we can provide the criteria for the exemption. But whether they meet that or not, that would have to be determined at the
Did
application.
you hunt them down and see if they'd make
I
an
certainly
application?
could, I could probably find.
Councilor Nelson?
I think building on that, it's not necessarily just people that are already here. It should be general enough that if there's,
Well, that's why I'm saying
Yeah.
it's gotta be for like,
yeah, like, let's make sure that it is covering what it needs to cover. And if I remember right with the non-residential tax incentive, it was more around big business and industry when it was created. Because there was not this acute issue that we're dealing with right now. And I think having a look at it with medical as the primary lens, but there also might be some feedback that we give as a council, like, okay, well, you guys are so focused on medical, but have you noticed that there's also a massive shortage in pizza and gas in Hinton?
liquor stores.
Right, they might say, we might learn something else and also say there's a really good opportunity to look at some smaller scale investment in our community that is acutely needed, so.
I agree. I mean, that's why I thought, let's take a poke at moving something forward here.
Yeah.
So,
Nelson?
Thank you. So the specifics on the criteria is, I mean, there is a number of them. I believe there's 9 different criteria, but the real substantial one is that any improvement would need to increase the assessed value of more than 25% by the end of year 2 when the permit was issued. So that is quite a high bar for any innovation, 25% increase in assessed value, but certainly could, but I'm not, again, that's what we would need to determine is what is that assessed value and how does that relate? We may not have those answers for a couple months, just given when the those new assessment numbers come in.
Councilor Johnson?
I guess to administration, and that particular document was based, you said, on maybe larger scale industry. Is that something that could be reevaluated based on a different category class of business?
Certainly can. So the original non-residential tax incentive bylaw came out and it was really only for that one exemption is when a non-residential property makes improvements that increases their assessment by 25%, you can get you can qualify for 5 years for the municipal portion of your taxes. We did amend this, I believe, at near the end of 2024 related to very specific circumstances to create what we called exemption B, which was another classification that was for very large heavy industrial when they are making significant investments in 1 year, and then they could be subject to up to 15 years worth of residential tax incentive. So I don't believe there's any, you can look at very specific classes as long as it's on a neutral basis, and you can assign different classes for different use for whatever you would like. So, even if you know, the medical clinics may or may not fit in with our incentives, we can create a whole new set of criteria to say, you know, you are allowed to apply once for this exemption. You can get, you know, say, you know, up to 15 years, any number that council directs, you could get this percentage off of your municipal taxes for this period of time. And you can classify that specifically for that use. Is the intent.
Thank you. Councilor Dunn? So to administration, so that would mean that any other business in town that falls under that category could potentially qualify?
Correct.
So that's what this is looking at then, is a current non-residential tax incentive bylaw we have now. Like, that's what we're doing, is we've got the bylaw now, we're just going to review it.
Correct. So
Okay.
With a new classification.
With a new classification that could include other groups.
Yeah, we could have a number of classifications, right? We could go commercial, we could go medical, we could go heavy industry, and we could put different percentages under each column, right? Theoretically.
And I comment, I don't think it was designed for big business necessarily. I mean, if you had $100,000 building, you had 25 grand, you qualify. So I think it's a, you know, it's a pretty robust bylaw, actually. It doesn't take long to have a building be worth 100 grand. It doesn't take long to add $25,000 of value to it. So I do think before the large employer category was added, I think it's the kind of law that we need, so.
Right. For myself, I will definitely be supporting this. I think it's a good step in the right direction for us to be reviewing and looking at this, and it's good. So no further hands up, and the consensus on the table, and call the question that committee direct administration to review the non-residential tax incentive bylaw 1161-2 with the addition of a new category, medical clinics.
Okay, I have a question. Can I ask this question now? Okay. So would medical clinics include physio, chiropractor, dental, all those clinics? Or maybe that needs to be determined?
That does, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Right, any other questions before I call the question? All right, so that committee direct administration to review the non-residential tax incentive bylaw 1161-2 with the addition of a new category of medical clinics. Please vote now. Is carried unanimously. All right, council.
I'm close to being ready to make another consensus, but I like to have a little more conversation if people have thoughts before I do so. I'm most curious about the kind of a cash incentive tied to whatever they get tied to. My concern around whether it's tax relief or you know, just putting some money towards purchase of buildings or, you know, marketing it. We can put a lot of money in without necessarily getting that outcome. But if that money is tied to that outcome, it's kind of like a sales bonus, you know, for anything. If you get it, it costs money. If you don't get it, then that money is saved. So I look at, you know, if we want to spend $50,000, if every outcome is met, you know, if the Oilers win the Stanley Cup, everybody gets more bonuses, but you don't pay, you know, Bouchard an extra $1 million in bonuses for, you know, one night of 3 goals, right? So I'm really curious of kind of what council thinks about that. And I honestly, that's, you know, kind of my concern with that working group is they might understand what that looks like to doctors and healthcare providers. Just kind of curious from council on that. Thank you.
Just before we go to Councilor Dunn, I had a hand up first. I just want clarity. Are you speaking about like the return of service bursary where the said recommended framework, like provide a minimum of so many visits within 60 months, like that type of thing? Or-
So direct incentives be kind of like that cash incentive. So anything that says you you basically get a bonus for being here and taking care of people, so.
So cash incentives, but attaching criteria. to-
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and as I said before, I don't understand it well enough to be super comfortable with it. I'd like to learn more, but only if there's an interest in the rest of council to learn what that would look like.
Councilor Dunn, you don't wanna-
When you're referring, Council Nelson, when you're referring to the working group, are you still referring to the previous working group of the two councillors, one of which is not here?
Yeah, I think, if we start talking about like a bonus system for our doctors, like, that might be something that there were discussions had that. Like, well, no, they feel like that's a cheap way and they're a social service and they're helping people. They're not a sales agency. Like, it might be something that's so poorly received by that vocation, but I wouldn't know that. And it's something maybe if something comes out of council, then we may get that feedback. And that's also like Arch might have that, like there may be that feedback, so.
Moving forward, and I don't know how we would go about this, but I would like to see the entire council be part of some of these discussions as opposed to one or two people. And I find this council is really good at getting together and for certain things, and I know it would be challenging, but I would like to see the whole council be involved.
The chair, members of council, just to keep in mind that if all of council is available, that is a council meeting. So my recommendation, if that is how we would want to go, then maybe, the physician should be invited as a delegation to a formal council meeting.
Great.
And my only other point related to the cash incentives, because we did talk to the working group about a lot of these specific items. Cash incentives were not viewed as universally effective except in targeted cases. Example, medical students with a return of service agreement. So we did have that discussion. Not to say that, the details may change that, but because it was talked about fairly broadly.
If I can just weigh in and then Mayor, the thing that's difficult about a delegation is the reasons and the conversations that turned into that working group was that many of the doctors felt that one person could not be the spokesperson for them in their clinic. They wanted their own individual voice to speak, not this is a clinic, this is a clinic, but this is me as a doctor, or this is me as a locum, and not clinic voice. So I'm not saying delegation is a bad idea, but the reason that it wasn't all of council, it wasn't done that way was very specific so that everyone could have even not anonymous, but private statements that, they could really be vocal about. And getting all of the doctors at the same time to a meeting is difficult, obviously, right? So, and I will agree with Seo Panasic that shockingly, and much to my surprise, while most people did like some sort of cash incentive, it was not the hottest topic. It was really about security, long-term support, and when some of the doctors, and I can't remember which ones off the top of my head because it was in July, but some of the conversations were around, in that kind of return of service bursary, where maybe some money is going to somebody who signs while they're still in school and they really need that money. And then they come to the community and they serve that time out. So you're kind of giving them that money when they're on the mac and cheese diet and when it's really valuable, and then have that return of service come forward. So that was some of the conversations. So I really felt that the cash incentives were a no-brainer at the time, and I would say sitting in that room, it was considered, but it was really more about consistency and operational things and feeling that they were supported and not wanting to run a business and on and on and on.
And that's why I believe it's important that we all are part of that, is so that we all understand the ideas of the positions.
Mayor Verge, do you still want to be in the queue?
CEO Nask made the point that was, when you read what are we saying about it, they, good for students, but maybe, and my fear with that is, I don't know what's the exact problem that we're addressing with that. I mean, if we need to figure out how to incent doctors to come here, we need to figure, like, if there's. You know, the problem there is we don't have enough doctors, but once they're here. You know, Hinton pays them a bonus and Edson doesn't, maybe we get an extra doctor because of that. But, I mean, I'm not, and then the off ramp gets to be a challenge. What do you mean? What do you mean you're gonna take away my, whatever it is, however we figured that is, I just, I would like to see us stay more. Universal in our consideration and always make sure we're solving a problem if we're gonna spend taxpayer money.
Yeah, question. Our obligation is done in July with the $1 million that council committed to. Where does that leave the Hinton Healthcare Foundation? Does that stay in existence or was that formed before the $1 million or?
Through the chair, yeah, the Hinton Healthcare Foundation has been operating. Well before we had these discussions, have always been had a need to improve. Healthcare in town, whether it be fundraising for equipment, you know, big presence on the Arch Committee, things like that, so. No, they'll continue to operate, they're within their mandate as a nonprofit.
And the commitment we made to move the funding to purchase the building, we will be owning the building. Or the foundation will.
Through the chair and members of the committee, so we had. Through the commitment that we made, the financial commitment, the Hinton Healthcare Foundation had approached the town and asked that if they could take a portion of the money we had already. Deficit funding essentially of the clinic and use some of that to actually purchase the Hinton Medical Clinic building. So at the time that we had agreed to allow them to reallocate some of those fundings for operations into the capital purchase, but it is going to be owned by the nonprofit.
So back to your administration, so some clarification here on the ownership of the building. The town of Hinton would still own percentage of that building with the 250,000 that they put into it, or the Hinton Healthcare Foundation would?
No, through the chair, the Hinton Healthcare Foundation will own the building.
With one. Caveat is that the town has a registered. Caveat against the property so that if it was sold.
I
Before
believe it's
5, 7, 10, 15
years,
the
yeah.
town gets their money back. So it's owned by the nonprofit, but.
No consensus on the table. We do have. Options, to either go through some of these other specific things or. We can always do a recommendation to. Bring this back to a future committee of the whole meeting with maybe with some more information if people are looking for some more things, but. We. Need some direction. Councilor Nelson.
I would like to see consensus to. I guess reappoint or to create the working group. Or bring back the terms of reference for the working group. I think all of these options are very, can carry a huge impact. I think some of them can carry less of an impact. I respect the concept of all of council and all this stuff, but what I've found is the types of conversations that that need to be had with something that is so confusing, dynamic, whatever it is, and you kind of go down the scenarios of, okay, what does this look like? And you go down the path. A delegation doesn't allow for it to kind of meander down the river to where it needs to get to see that fork and say, okay, we've gone here, but we actually need to go this way. And then that working group brings that context to this group, to really help add that flavor. The other thing that I've seen too is there are a lot of frank things that people will say as part of a working group that they would never say in a formal meeting setting that's streamed on YouTube, and like it's just different. And so as a council, we need to have these type of tough conversations at the table, but expecting, a family doctor that's, worried about doing surgery and stuff to come to this table and make those really straightforward black and white comments that need to be made and challenging us on it, because once the delegation comes, that back and forth is not it can be pretty, it's only gonna get to that surface. And I agree, it's great if we can all be part of those conversations, but I think sometimes we just can't. And I look at the strength of my opinions on this and how weak they are compared to most things that come in front of us. To me, it's something where I just don't know about the unintended consequences and as much as I would like to. And I think it actually might be a more efficient way to have this come forward than, we have a committee meeting and then 2 weeks later we have another committee meeting and we learn like a little bit here and then I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
So would you wanna talk first or should I let council go? See your peers.
No, through the chair, the only thing to consider is, we don't have to create a working group in terms of reference and all those kinds of things, because if we did want to, we can just, committee can just make a motion for direct administration to solicit input on the options available with the local positions, and then we can send out, we already have all of them on an email list, we've already been engaging them quite often. Really, we can just send something out to them saying, we're soliciting more feedback on the options available. Can you provide your comments on all of the different options available and provide that to council? It's usually a little bit easier with scheduling with the group.
Yeah, and I totally agree. It's difficult to get a bunch of positions together, but just on Council Nelson, like I wasn't suggesting the delegation part. I totally understand that the group in front of us as a delegation would not have the same conversations. But with what CEO Panasic said about then it becomes a committee. I mean, we've gone to other like help, and we're going to visit as a committee. But it's not called a committee meeting. So I'm just wondering why we couldn't do something like that in a meeting with the positions. I mean, I understand the concept is different, but I agree. Like, I don't think having them as a delegation would have the same conversations. And I don't know that everybody has to be there. I just think this is one of those topics where it's nice that everyone hears it from the people talking, as opposed to a follow-up coming as one or two people.
Councillor McDonald's and I'll put myself in queue.
I have to agree with Councillor Dunn here. I'd actually like to see it where we can actually sit down with the Hinton Health board. And get their view on things as well. As a whole, instead of a couple of other council members going there too, because I think it's just gonna create more dialogue. Maybe that may be an approach we could go with.
I have myself in queue, and I do like the idea, the concept of this, but I struggle going back to the doctors with the exact same information they already gave us feedback on. So it's a lot of their time and I know it's a lot for everyone to get their head around, and even from like, I know I sit in a different spot. So is there a way? What's the most effective way that if we're getting their time and we're getting, do we say, okay, here's what council discussed, here's the options that administration's recommending based on the feedback from those meetings. Here's an opportunity for you to provide us more feedback, and based on that feedback, determine if there's big departure from what we heard the first time. Because the climate has changed in Hinton too since July, right? Things are different. There's been some movements in different areas, so. You know, if there's a large departure from that, then, you know, maybe we could look at striking a kind of a mini group or having a couple. Maybe more of like an open house type session. I don't know if that's what your meeting counts are done, something that we kind of have those options and an opportunity from this time to this time that physicians could come in and speak with us directly or something like that. But I struggle to go to a group that's constantly running around with their hair on fire saying, can you sit down with us again and give us your same feelings on the same things we already asked you in July? That's hard. So if we have more, either we come up with some direction on these specific items and say, okay, these are our top 4 things we like. That's in our hit list and we want to bring that to you guys to look at, or do we look at something else? But I think all of us hearing from them today in this climate is good, but I think we need to be giving them something other than what we gave them last time.
I agree. I think that's a good idea, is to come forward with maybe some items from the document that was presented. But I also think they would appreciate the fact that it's a new town council and that we want to hear their concerns.
Councilor Charlton?
Could it be a representative from the Hinton Healthcare Foundation that represents the voice of the doctors? Is that a possibility?
I'm not speaking from anything that anyone said to me, but what was discussed in the previous meeting was that the doctors wanted to represent themselves.
Sure.
Like in that,
And I
like they wanted to
apologize.
be able to
You
speak
did make that
freely.
point. so-
I doesn't, but I mean, we could do it that way.
Yeah.
But it was other doctors approaching other
Yeah.
council members saying,
No, I forgot.
hey, I
you
don't
made that
agree
point.
necessarily with, you know, my biggest concern is X.
Yeah.
And everyone else is worried about A, B, and C, but X is really what's critical to my specific
Yeah,
life circumstance or situation.
Yeah, I like the idea, the concept of sending them out, our 2 or 3 options or 3 or 4 options, saying this is what we're narrowing in, focusing on. Because I look at the report from the meeting in July 2025, and it doesn't really prioritize. It said, here's 5 or 6 or 7 things. So if we narrow it down, scope out, say that, and if they say, no, you guys shouldn't really focus on 3, you should focus on one of these that we missed, then we can get back together with them and say why that one not the cash incentive, or why that one not this. So I really like the idea of sending out what we're kind of narrowing in on, and then getting their feedback. And then if it differs from why we're focusing, then ask the question why, and can we get together and find out why? So I'll be support that idea.
So we have a consensus on the table. Councilor Nelson?
So one thing in past history, I would rather friendlily withdraw this than it fail. Only because optically it can say we don't wanna have people working towards healthcare. That's happened before. And people just read the minutes and see that. I believe it was Beaver Boardwalk that happened with, and I'm trying to put some consensus out to help the conversation move forward. So if committee's amenable, I would happily withdraw that and look forward to kind of where else we'll go, if that's possible.
Is it possible before you type too much? I don't have to make a suggestion in the motion if I'm the chair. Sure. Friendly amendment? No. No.
We're making
No,
friendly
not
withdrawal.
Not a motion as the chair, unless you delegate it.
I'm just wondering if there would be a wording that could be changed in here with the same intent. That I won't suggest, but I could, you know, something about that, you're directing administration to
Seek input from
seek input from.
the local physicians for the
physicians.
purpose of the.
And, you know, and maybe having them even rating what they think would be most impactful to least impactful, something simple like that in their current situations. In their document, because we did get pretty good paper feedback from the doctors, I think, last, like, emails and they filled
Yes,
out
I believe we had a much better success with providing it to them, and then they could, they could write back just due to the scheduling and those types of things. So
can I ask a specific follow-up? So maybe part of our knowledge gap is if there was a bunch of this work done outside of kind of that summary document of what we've heard, I don't have access to that, and I think that might be something that, you know, before this comes back to us, we can read through those emails, because those emails might carry a lot of kind of that tone and general ideas in general that the, you know, that pretty basic summary document doesn't do. So that might really help my my understanding of this versus just, you know, kind of those bullet points of recognition of rural generalists to specialists. And so I don't know if that's
I don't even know what that is.
I don't necessarily either. So it's, yeah, that might be something that really helps me out personally, and the rest of the committee feels the same.
And in all fairness, I'll go to Councillor Dunn in a second, some things were just one comment from one person. You know, so some of those things, it didn't mean 10 people thought that was something, might have just been one person that was there, but, yeah, Councillor Dunn.
That's a good point, Councillor Nelson, and something I was gonna bring up, but I thought I would wait for the meeting. Under the information, in the information that we received, it did say that, the engagement consisted of 3 phases. Phase 1 was written feedback, brainstorming, initial input, so I think that's kind of information that we would be receiving. And then there was the in-person meeting, which was what you had attended, correct?
Yeah.
Councillor Chambers, and then the report review and stakeholder recommendations. So we've seen the report, right? That's the report that it's referring to.
Correct. I'm trying to remember if there was, but I believe that we had created a package, not one that was public, just because it was individual opinions. And was very specific and sometimes business oriented. I believe that's the case. Again, I'm trying to remember back to July and exactly what we had done, but I don't know, Councillor Chambers, if you recall. But if there is, I can take a look and see if there is something related to that. And we can certainly accompany it if council wants to go out and solicit additional input. I can also take a look for that. For the individual responses, create a package for council to read through if you'd like.
Thank you.
Following in the top one of consensus and the bottom one withdrawn.
Well, it's the same motion, it's just gradually amended. With no input from the chair.
Who's even chairing the meeting? Councillor Dunn.
I'm just wondering if in here, should we reference the previous information that we received? Like, would that help, Councillor Nelson, with what you were saying? That we directed just to seek input from officers for developing solutions and reviewing municipal support for healthcare. Could we say like based on previous information received or something, or would that help? I don't know.
Yeah, so my concern about that one now, knowing like if we're gonna get more information is, I'm wondering if this should happen after we see that information, because for me, like, I would much rather, if we're going to go back out to physicians, let's ask them, you know, here are the 3 things, and I like, if there's things that committee is like completely against, like if we're completely against cash incentives, then let's knock it off so that we can go back and have it be more targeted towards things that the council is interested in. I think part of the challenge is we have our administrative report that has a lot of options, and then we have the report summary, which has a lot of options, and none of them are bad. Like, that I'm really trying to say, like, let's cross out these 6 things. And so it's just, it feels so broad right now, that going back, I think that, you know, echoes kind of what Kristen, or Deputy Mayor Chambers was saying, going back to them with the same amount of stuff. So, yeah, thank you.
Oh, sorry. See how you doing? You go.
Oh, sorry, my only suggestion is if we wanted to keep this up, because I do think that prioritizing specific options is a good practice, because I know when we went out the first time, the one thing that we realized is there is a very wide range of opinions on this, even from within the group of physicians. when it came to this, so. You know, I don't know if it'll be possible to make everybody happy with this decision. But I think that, you know, even looking at prioritizing as a way to get, you know, a better sense of where. You know, where the critical mass sits when it comes to policy. May be valuable, because that is the one thing that we didn't do. We did solicit input on all of them. But the input was fairly diverse, so it's gonna make it very difficult for council to wade through. You know, even the individual responses and come up with a good collective idea of what you should do, and I just don't wanna set those expectations. I think that the best document was the summary document of, you know, the general themes and things brought up. But it was difficult to extract those themes.
Okay, so my comment maybe can work with that wording as well, just as I think what you're saying is maybe something that's not so specific, but something maybe that could show weighting as to maybe what held more value than others. Just, I know there's some new doctors that are coming to Hinton that have arrived as well. It would be curious to hear without making their answers be so specific, because people may not always be comfortable giving specific answers, but something that could give maybe a little bit more of a weighted value, like a little bit broader, like not something so specific, but you know, what did you see or feel was a bigger attraction? I mean, I recently had the opportunity to talk to somebody that is practicing in the area. And, you know, a lot of it was about lifestyle for Hinton. So, you know, money was part of it. But it certainly wasn't everything. So, I mean, it would be interesting to see how they all gave a perspective that wasn't so specific where anybody had to definitely say, this is my name and this is what my answer is.
Well, I see this whole discussion really stratifying at this point, because now we're talking about doctor incentives and we have clinics. And I think those are two different things that we're gonna have to think about and consider go forward. And they're distinct, one from the other, and I'm beginning to work my head around back to the initial comments that Councillor Nelson made as relating to a working group as some way to take what now is like almost an unlimited number of options of directions that we could take, and maybe in some way, and maybe the physicians don't have to sit there all the time, but some way to try to focus that discussion a little bit.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with the mayor. When he mentioned that for us to go through and prioritize 2 or 3, then like, I'm not medical professional and stuff like that, but I can pick 3 out of here and it may mean nothing to the clinics that we're talking about and the doctors we're talking about, right? So one thing I was gonna suggest is that we get a presentation from the Hinton Healthcare Foundation. Right, I apologize, I'm probably not up to snuff on exactly what their working group does and everything. So getting back to that echoes, I think what you're saying is fall back on, we need that working group to follow through on what we're doing.
I think I'll put myself in, I think the thing that's important to remember though too is that just because 10 doctors say that this is what they would like, doesn't mean that we're going to agree that it's the right role for a municipality. So I think it's also dangerous to, you know, when we look at these incentives, you know, we need to be looking at them from, is this something that we feel a municipality should be doing for healthcare? So we do want to know the feedback from the doctors, obviously, and that was why we did that, but we need to be considering those things while we're making a decision as a municipal councillor, knowing our role and what that long-term piece is as well. So, you know, we don't want to pigeonhole ourselves where we say, oh, well, 16 out of 17 doctors say that they all wanted this, but we don't think it's our role, and now we haven't.
We got 17 doctors, awesome.
Wishful thinking.
Problem over.
By the time we get this figured out, we couldn't. But I think we have to remember that too, that yes, we don't wanna be doing things that don't have any impact, but you gotta temper, what are we doing with these pieces of information, and if we're going out there, we gotta be careful that we're not fishing down a well that we're not prepared for. Counselor Nelson?
I think the one thing that everybody agrees on is really relooking at that tax incentive and make sure that it works for clinics. We have Arch, which is a retention piece, and I would assume that if Arch was made aware, or the Hinton Healthcare Foundation, if people had great ideas, you see things working elsewhere, it would come to council. I'd wonder if we just make sure we get going on the tax incentive and then keep the door open for all the other things. And if we want to have a delegation from Hinton Healthcare Foundation, if we want to have a delegation from Arch or whatever else, you know, what I worry about is if we tie a whole bunch of things, we're trying to figure out a whole bunch of things, that the one thing we agreed upon gets held up because we're trying to figure out all the other options. So I think that's an option we have. Like, let's just get going on that. And if there's clarity achieved at some point with all of these other options, then attack those when it's a little more clear than it is now.
Counselor Dunn?
I agree. I don't think we have to hold up one in order to do another. And just going back to what Deputy Mayor Chambers said, as an example, there might be daycare was one of the items in there that they expressed. Well, I mean, maybe we can't commit to holding a spot at daycare for anybody. So to me, that could be an example of where that was important to the decisions, but maybe something as a municipality we cannot do. But I still go back to the fact that like the follow-up piece, from what I can tell, I could be wrong, from administration hasn't been done. So I think we're on our way with that part regardless. We have to do that part. And however that's decided. We can decide.
So what I understand the consensus that's on the floor right now would be asking administration to seek input from the local physicians for developing solutions and reviewing municipal support for healthcare, which would, as it stands in this moment, be reviewing what was presented to us as options and then weighing in on that. Is that the understanding of the motion on the table? Not necessarily the conversation, but what that consensus is saying? Dale?
That's my understanding. Yep. So, and just for committee is, you know, we'll certainly be respectful of everybody's time and make sure that it's novel enough, but it's really, my understanding of this is, you know, we know that the general feeling on some of these, but we haven't weighted them and we haven't started to narrow them down with the physician groups. And that's a piece of information that council would like to further this discussion.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot. I do think this could be an interesting piece that will have other pieces coming from it, but it would show that we did do work with the information that they gave us. You know, what is some of that feedback piece, but in a simple format, I think would be there, but I don't know, without anybody, unless anyone's jumping up and down to be diving into other things one by one, then I think we almost have to do some of that work. And
I think, so we've got consensus on the tax incentive part, so I think when we go out, we can say, hey, we're moving forward with this, we don't know what it looks like yet, we would like specific feedback from this, because we want to move forward with it. And we're also looking for, and it can be after it comes to us, like after we've had a chance to look at that bylaw. But if we go back saying we're doing this and we're still open to other ideas, versus just like we want ideas again, I think showing some level of commitment to action, I think might solicit better feedback than just another general, we want more information for another batch of stuff. So if this waits until we have some direction on what the tax incentive looks like, I think it might get better results than just in general, we want to know more.
I'm just looking at the motion up here and everything, and to me, this is demuniorizing the Hinton Health Board committee in a way, and it's questioning, okay, right, what their job is in the first place. Shouldn't this be their job?
Remember?
So I've heard it a couple of times. Listen, let's be clear. Hinton Healthcare Foundation was founded in 87 when Mabel Lee started collecting pennies for the furniture in the hospital. It's just a bunch of citizen volunteers. So it's not the Hinton Health Board. There's no government affiliation, there's no, and I'm not disagreeing if maybe that's the way to go, but I do think at this point, they've been charged with that building. That's their direction. That's what they were brought in to do, and I guess I wasn't here exactly, but I asked that question, and that was kinda, they brought this community group in to manage that money, correct?
Correct.
And so their mandate is that building, so I would rather see a working group from this group. Who takes the time rather than going back to them and saying, you know, take some more of your time and do this. Would be my thought as it relates to the Hinton Healthcare Foundation.
Yeah, just a little bit of clarity, I guess. So Councillor Nelson's point, we have consensus on to look at the non-residential taxes. So we would send out the rest of these options to physicians and stuff and ask for them. Is there something in there that jumps off the page that you really think would help us? And give us some direction and bring that information back with all the other information that was accumulated over since July or whatever. And then bring that back to a committee of the whole, future committee of the whole.
Correct.
Yep, see you.
I would just ask one more question, or maybe just a comment of understanding, and then council can weigh in if we've gotten that right, but you know, we don't have any formal direction about, you know, where these subsidies would be allocated to, but it's always been, at least my understanding, that this, we're talking about either physicians or the corporate body of the clinics.
Correct.
You know, we've, in previous reports, we've left it general as healthcare professionals because that has never been a formalized motion of council. That's the two groups we're talking about. The other one is if we are going to go out and solicit feedback, we have been operating under the direction that ownership options are off the table. So the town purchasing a clinic and running a clinic, or, you know, owning anything in relation to healthcare has been off the table. Does that still stand with this group? Because if we do want to open it up, and when we did meet with the physicians, we didn't steer that away because we wanted to hear all of the options. And that ownership piece was one of the options that was, I would say, strongly favored by a good percentage of the physicians. But my direction is that we're not looking at ownership options. But I just wanted to make sure that those 2 points were clear with council, and we're still operating under those two assumptions. Correct.
I mean, my thought is, and this was the argument or discussion point that I had early on with the Health Foundation, was the town's a bad owner for a time. Because it comes under all the rules as it relates to the town, from cost of employees to the cost of repairing the building to the cost of mowing the lawn. And what the doctors have said is we want a profitable place to do our business. And I just I don't know that municipalities are a good place or a good supplier of that base. So, I mean, that was my thought as it relates. So from my personal position, I think that that's still the case.
Personally agree as well. I think that a lot's moved again, since the time that we were having that conversation, there was a lot of insecurity of ownership of the clinic and what that future could potentially look like, and I think that's been tidied up now, so I don't think that's a road that we need to go down at this moment. I think that's, we gotta let that proof itself out in that fashion. So I'm uncomfortable leaving this on the table any further, because I think we're kind of talking ourselves in circles and we need some more. We gotta I think we all know what we want, we just don't know how to get there, so. I think administration's clear on what this. Is everyone else clear of what this would mean? Just basically reaching out with the. The incentives and a bit of a touch base, this is what we heard, this is what council's looking at. Something simple, driving probably some future motions.
Just a quick question, the motion that was made before about getting the
The
tax incentive back, is there a timeline, will these come together, or can we get that tax incentive report first?
Sale.
Through the chair, we can do it in any order that council would like. My recommendation would be to do not wait for one to do the other, because, you know, we do have a lot of time, but the funding is also concluding in July. By the time we, you know, go out for feedback, draft these, we don't have as much time as we think. And I think that just doing things in, you know, that type of order, it'll just extend this quite a bit. And I think that we can let them know that we are going down this road of drafting a non-residential tax incentive bylaw. You know, this is what it will look like. We'll, you know, we're in the process of developing some criteria, and maybe this will be a good opportunity to also seek some feedback in the very early days of the drafting of that, the details of, you know, what makes you unique, that we can make sure we have the right classification for, and we can do kind of both of those at the same time.
And that makes sense to me.
I think too, even just saying, you know, is there anything that you feel is important for new council to know, or is there anything that you don't feel was captured in these recommendations, or that's come to light in the last however many months, right? Like, I think just because that's really what it is, you know, the fresh faces hearing those most critical things, and that could change the conversation a bit. All right, so I will call the consensus that committee direct administration to seek input from the local positions for developing solutions and reviewing municipal support for healthcare. Please vote now. Read unanimously. Took a while, but we got there. All right. Are there any other motions coming from this item specifically? Seeing none, then we will move on to agenda item 4.2, which is the vehicle for hire bylaw number 2024.
Chair, and this one will go to Mr. Murphy.
Good afternoon, Chair, and the rest of the committee. Vehicle for hire bylaw number 2024 is back before committee today as a result of the second reading of the bylaw being defeated on January 6, 2026. So the administrative report that is before you today, I just want to highlight a few parts of it and then open it up to any questions that you may have. So again, the taxi bylaw, the original attachment 1 was given third reading and passed on September 19th, 2006. This bylaw has not been amended since that enactment, making it 2 decades. For you today are two versions of the proposed vehicle for hire bylaw. The first being what we refer to as the allowed version, which includes regulations for rideshare companies and drivers to follow if operating in Hinton. We also have attached what we're referring to as the banned version, which specifies that rideshare companies and drivers are not permitted to operate or accept business in the town of Hinton. In this report, you also note some additional graphs. Two of those graphs have been previously presented to committee back in November of 2025. The third graph is a new one where there's a comparison of comparable municipalities with similar population size to the town of Hinton, and whether or not it's just outlining whether or not there is a current bylaw, and if there is, whether or not TNC is mentioned in that said bylaw. Administration is looking for some direction from committee, basically with the options 1 or 2 that you will note. Yeah, I do also want to just comment very quickly that there is option 3, that committee direct administration to bring the vehicle for hire bylaw number 2024, rideshare unmentioned to regular council meeting. You'll note that there are some details, and as you make those comparisons in those graphs, there are municipalities that have not mentioned rideshare whatsoever in their bylaw. The only thing I would like to comment is the one concern from an administration standpoint of the possibility that if we just do not mention it, it really limits our ability as a municipality to regulate should TNC in the future come and start operating within the municipality of Hinton. But as you'll see, there are those options available to you, and I'll turn it over to any questions that you may have.
So I read through this and I tried to compare one to the other, and really the only difference is you put a definition in there of TNC, correct? Like they're bound by all the same regulation as any other form, whether it's a shuttle bus or a taxi, correct?
Correct. So basically it's updating that current bylaw that doesn't mention anything with shuttles or ride share. And basically the allowed version is basically outlining the responsibilities of any of those and how they would operate in the town of Hinton. Correct.
Info. And so if we're silent to it, it's allowed, correct? Like we regulate things that aren't allowed. So if we're silent to it, it's allowed, is that correct?
Yes.
Through the chair,
Sometimes.
that has always been what I believed, but not all municipalities do that. Some will take the position of it's not regulated through the bylaw, then it's not allowed. So I think that in order to be clear on that point and to make sure that there's, that those understandings don't get mixed, because our position when it comes to these types of services has been in the town of Hinton in the past. If it's not included in our taxi bylaw, it's not an approved use. So, my suggestion is to cut out all of the confusion and make sure that, one way or the other, we're mentioning these things and making sure. I would imagine that all of the municipalities that don't mention ride shares, most of them are authorizing them. And then if they become a problem, then they would try to look at, regulating those services retroactively, but my suggestion is to include it now.
Well, I would just like to make the motion that committee refer the vehicle for hire bylaw number 2024, the allowed version, to future regular council meeting and present it. And I say that because, and as I mentioned this in the past, that I believe it gives the residents of Hinton more options. I believe it gives more options during busy times. When maybe taxis are not available. I've seen lots of times on Facebook where taxi says you don't have any taxis available at this moment. And I know we don't have anyone presenting to us right now or asking, but I think it's important that we be proactive and have this in place if and when it's requested.
Nelson?
Yeah, I didn't speak much last week, because I assumed it was going a certain way, but, right now, the feedback that we've received from taxi companies is they don't want them here, and they don't think that there's a market for it, but right now, if there was a market for it, they would be here, because the province says that they can. And we can try to say no informally, but that's a significant risk. To me, having it in here means we can potentially get some business license revenue, we can monitor it, we can collect data on it, we can understand it if and when it does come. And to ban it, to me, just seems like something a council should be doing. If the market and customers are looking for something, I really struggle to say that council saying no to something that could potentially save citizens money, make it more convenient, make it more modern. You know, a lot of people don't want to pick up the phone anymore. They want to order, they'll never call Pizza Hut, but they'll order Pizza Hut on their app. It's just, customers want different things, and if rideshare comes in and is incredibly successful, then taxi companies might look and say, oh, we need to modernize our business and change our operating model and do like, and I don't think it's, I don't think we should ignore it, because I think there's risk there, but I also don't think we should restrict it. Because again, it's, if the market says that there's a demand, then so be it. So, thank you.
Put myself in, because we know I have lots of opinions on this. I appreciate the information that came out and understanding it. For me, it was interesting to see how many places don't even have a bylaw, period. I think that was interesting information, and I did some of my own digging as well into different communities and just tried to even go and check out which communities had what and what you could do and different things like that, but I still won't support this. I don't support ride shares in Hinton. And I have tried to come around to it, and I still don't. I just don't think we're there yet. And I don't know, I just don't support it. So I won't support the motion, but I do appreciate the additional information that was presented, and did find it quite interesting that how many communities of our size just are silent on it in general. That was quite interesting. And I do respect the piece of understanding why not to stay silent on it, because that was one of the comments I made before. Mayor, and then Councilor Charles.
Yeah, I'm gonna speak in favor of this. I always hesitate when governments pick winners and losers. And I don't know that that's necessarily our job. I remember being approached by administration a number of years ago to get my view on whether there should be any more liquor stores in Hinton, and it's just a slippery slope, like where you end, you say you're not allowed to do whatever, because my opinion is you shouldn't do that. The market will decide, and my fear is always getting the government involved in deciding who's allowed to do what, so.
Councilor Charlton?
Yeah, and my comment as well, I will be supporting this because I feel that it is not our position to really decide what business should be coming to town and what shouldn't. I mean, I 100% would like to see our taxi companies successful here in Hinton, but I just don't think we know what we don't know yet as to what could be coming down the road in a year or two from now, and I think that.
Down the road.
I could even touch my own son. Yeah, I think the wording should be included.
Yeah, I voted against it to bring it back to the committee of the whole, but I'll be supporting it now that I did some research as well and looked at the other cities and municipalities that have been putting in extra I guess hurdles or barriers for them, and I don't see that problem in him. And I think moving forward, I'm ready to move forward, and this is an opportunity for us to move forward. There is none in town, and like Councillor Nelson said, if there's a need for them, they'll be here. So I'll support it.
So the consensus on the table is that committee referred the vehicle for hire bylaw number 2024 allow version to a future regular council meeting as presented. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we will. Please vote now. That is,
I didn't get a thingy, so I'm saying, I vote yes.
okay, so that is carried 5-2 with councillors Chambers and McDonald against. All right. Round and round we go on that one. Okay, agenda item 4.3, fleet replacement policy IN-3201. Dale.
Thank you. I will turn this over to Mr. McLaughlin.
Good afternoon. We have talked about bringing you a fleet replacement policy now since you've been elected, and we talked about it lots through budget and even again, last committee and last council meeting. So we have a draft in front of you, tonight. We did review quite a few different other municipalities, to what they do. And we've included sort of, what we think was the average of what's in there. Our policy we're putting in front of you has a little bit longer timelines generally than what the others have, just because of the state our fleet's currently in and trying to keep the amount of contributions to reserves lower. It does mean that we may have instances where we do have to do emergency replacements like we did last council meeting. So we're looking forward to that discussion. In terms of expectations for tonight, we wanted you to have a look, tell us what you like, what you don't like, sort of give us some general guidance, and our thought is we'll probably likely be bringing it back to you again. We're certainly not looking for you to rush this through, but we just kind of want to know if we've missed anything or if anything that's in it should be deleted. With that, we'll take any questions.
All right, committee.
I have a question, actually. So on page 65, sorry, 66, that table that's where it's got required total contributions, like that word contribution in those final two columns there should be balance, right? That's the balance of that particular reserve fund, is that correct? We should have collected. Well, for protective services, there should be a balance in the reserve account of 3.4 million. There's actually 644,000. Is that correct?
Yeah, that through the chair, committee, that is correct. That would be if we had been fully funding our fleet to date, that's what we should have in there.
Okay, follow up. So they all seem to be in line. So what I did is I looked at required and actual differences. So for instance, on protective services, we're underpaying by 65% using those two numbers. But our total, we're underwater by 81%. I get it. Those things happen over time. But with public works, we're only underpaying that account by 25%. But we're underwater on that by like 78%. How come that, like, what's happened in public works? If we just made big purchases lately?
To the chair of the committee, I'm gonna pass this one to Alex Corberdine, our operations manager.
Through the chair to the rest of council, your observation there is correct. Our actual annual contributions are not too far off of what we should be allocating yearly. That's because in the last couple of years, we have made strides towards the right direction. I'm not sure what the annual contributions in previous years were prior to us bringing this OBC to council in 2024, I believe. I believe the total annual contributions into the fleet reserve was, I think it was somewhere around $500,000.
So this could be just an allocation then.
Absolutely, yeah, so, so the initial contributions, actually on page 67, you'll see that the actual contributions into reserve was $570,000. And we were asking to increase contributions to reserves by $158,345 per year consecutively until the year 2030, so that we reach an adequate funding level for the fleet that we currently have. The total required reserve, the outstanding balance that we have right now, you'll be able to see in the spreadsheet draft that we've provided to you. In Public Works, there are a number of fleet units that have excessively exceeded the recommended replacement guidelines. For example, unit 441, we have a 2002 430D backhoe unit, which is currently 25 years old, coming up on 25 years. That's much longer than we typically would like to keep a unit, and that's why we see that balance there of 3.6 million and in some change there, is because there's a snowball effect of units that we should have replaced that are now we're trying to play catch up on.
Does that machine still work?
Yeah, it's it doesn't get used very often, but it will turn on and we'll get the job done if we have to send it in. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Nelson.
I'll have a few questions. One of the things in my first term, I was really good at asking a lot of questions at the budget time, or, this is on this spreadsheet, and I didn't spend a lot of time asking questions at the policy level. And so one of my goals is to ask those questions. So I want to frame my questions with that in mind. So at a high level, does this policy allow or encourage administration to look at kind of forward thinking options? And I think the best example would be, 20 years ago, would this policy have allowed the administration or encourage administration to look at garbage trucks that don't have two guys holding on to the bumper, throwing bags in the back of the truck?
Through the chair committee, I would say that maybe not that exact example that you put forward. I'm not sure that we've captured that in there, but I do see a number of places that, would help us improve. And the biggest one is making sure the money is there to do the replacement when we need to. And then the second one is under this policy, the spreadsheet was provided as a sample of what you would be seeing at budget time. It's the same spreadsheet that we showed you. So it allows us to be looking at 5-year chunks instead of yearly chunks, which means hopefully we're a little bit more proactive. This will work hand in hand with the level of service policy going forward, but we've also included the column of the purpose of each vehicle, so you kind of know what it is that it does. When we bring forward the level of service policy, it will also have the equipment that's dependent to provide the service.
So the spreadsheet is where I would typically ask questions, and the spreadsheet comes out of the policy. So for me, one of the things that I would be looking for is something to the effect of explore technological advancements that can demonstrate net cost savings, increase safety, and improve customer service, or other. I would love to, if there's an option to, because we don't know what 5 years, 10 years is going to look like. And to me, the policy really reinforces the status quo fleet. So we have this, we have this F-150, we replace it with a F-150 10 years later. It doesn't look at, you know, is there, like, what will autonomous look like in 5 years? What will, you know, how many municipalities already have started replacing lawn tractors with the robotic ones to the sports field because it's safer, it's more efficient, it's cheaper in the long, and I just don't want, I want administration to be looking and exploring those things that are that triple threat that make it safer, cheaper, and better.
I'm not sure that we've captured it well in the policy, maybe we'll take that to maybe formalize it in there. I would say that we already are doing those things. Brief examples are Parks, just in the last cycle bought a tool cat. Well, that replaced 2 skid steers. So 2 skid steers went for sale and we got a tool cat. So that was, you know, looking at what's better there for that. Another example that we're looking forward at is we have a water truck that is being replaced here, and you know, we're looking at options of could we use a water tank slip truck tank into our gravel trucks instead of actually replacing the water truck. So, you know, we're doing those things, and
So I think for me, I would love it if the policy that council sets encourages that and doesn't make it, because you might be, but you might have a staff member that knows something but doesn't want to share it because it's not what the policy is. Council hasn't said, hey, we want to look at what's possible. Our policy says we want to repeat what we've been doing and replace what we have. So, and I would make a direction as well. I don't know if that's how we'll want to go about this, but,
Yeah, through the chair, if we could, if we could make a direction request to include that. I don't think you need to put the specific section down, but I think in section 6, it fits well because it's really looking at the replacement assessment and all the things that we look at. You know, like that should be built into our decisions on whether to replace something. So I think that, you know, an analysis of options or you know, alternative technologies or operating costs might be a good.
so I'm gonna try a consensus that allows admin to like edit and put it wherever and do whatever, because I write stuff down, but it doesn't mean it's legal or logical. So I'd like to seek consensus that the fleet policy reflect opportunities to explore technological advancements that can demonstrate net cost savings, increased safety, improved customer service, or other positive outcomes. Back to longer fun next time, Jen.
Love it.
Thank you.
Okay, Mayor LaBarge, you had your hand up just prior to this. Let's come out, you still wish to speak.
Yeah, well, I guess I agree 100%. And I would hope that administration going through that on a unit by unit perspective when they look at it, but we have to find some way that we can realistically point to that says that's how we're gonna go about having enough money to be able to do the things we want to do. Without it being unit 418 being replaced in 20 years. But we need some system, and this one seems to be an okay system. To say, we'll probably always have this dollar value in equipment. We're gonna have to replace it, and I mean, if we were a company, we could just go to the bank, borrow money unit up by unit. But the challenge of the municipality, and thank God there aren't more politicians borrowing money on behalf of taxpayers. But we do have to think this ahead. And, I mean, I didn't spend a lot of time on the spreadsheet because it makes sense to me. But, we do need to come up, you know, regardless of where we go here, we gotta come up with some system for saying, how do we have the money we need to replace the things we need? Question, did we approve, and it was weeks ago, so I can't remember, the 158 grand? Did we approve that condition upon this discussion? No, it's off for this year. Is that correct?
We approved that. That 150. Oh, absolutely. we did. I remember that because
This $158,000 additional contribution, my memory was. It was done conditioned upon the discussion of the fleet policy. And that was, I just wanted to clarify in my mind that that's what we are talking about here, correct?
Yeah, through the chair, my memory might not be much better than yours.
Was weeks ago.
Back to budget, about a month, but I know that we had it included, maybe perhaps we noted it, created it as a noted project, we'll confirm. Like, I don't remember, to be perfectly honest, but we'll confirm.
Councilor McLean?
Yeah, I made the motion to remove it, and it was defeated. To be left included in the budget, so, but when I was looking at this is the 2025 numbers, right? And that would be the 2026 numbers, so instead of the 500 and some contribution, it would be 720 or something like that. That would be contributed to the fleet, right? And rightfully so, after some discussion and stuff, I see the error in my way by trying to cut that out. And going back to my original plan when I got on council was try to set out a plan and try to stick to it. And I like the spreadsheet and I like the plan and just the numbers at the end of the year there for 26, 27, 28, 29. It would be nice if there were a little more balance, right? Where we got a 1 year, 1,700,000 and another year, we got $100,000, right? It'd just be better, I think, for us if we could balance, and I don't know if it makes a difference, but just looking at that, but thank you for the spreadsheet, thanks for the information, and I'll be supporting moving forward with this policy.
See you?
Yeah, through the chair, and just for clarity for council, we know we have the 158 already included in the budget. What I wasn't certain on is whether we had that as noted, where we were not going to move that into reserves until we had this conversation, but I know it's been included in the budget. It wouldn't require a budget adjustment as a part of this policy.
That was my question.
Can I just request that, like, there's gonna be a few things that I want to bring forward as far as amendments to the policy, and we've gone completely away from what like kind of a small piece of the policy. I'm just concerned if we go broad each one, then I'm gonna tire you guys all out because I've got a couple.
Giver.
All right, well, no, we'll deal with the consensus that's on the table right now. So the consensus is that committee direct administration that the fleet policy reflect opportunities to explore technological advancement that can demonstrate net cost savings, increase safety, improve customer service, or other positive outcomes. I will just say I support this. I think the best written policies often lack intent, and it's easy to have all the right people sitting at the table understanding it, but in 10 years or 20 years from now, you get some people that read policies and they go letter by letter, and if it's not in there, it's not happening. So I think putting this in is a nice safeguard to encourage that. So for that, I will call this to question. Please vote now. And that is carried unanimously. Ready? Councilor Dunn.
Just before Councilor Nelson continues. I just have a small point to make. with the Freedom Transit Coach under Corporate Services FCSS, that's the one we are replacing, correct? Okay, so I noticed, and it would be a medium to heavy duty. And it was purchased year was 2014. And it said it would be replaced in 10 years or 200,000 kilometers. Or engine hours, and there's no engine hours in here. I guess I'm just making the point that we exceeded the 10 years and it failed. Was the 10 years, was it meant to exceed 10 years? Like, did we make that choice on purpose? To administration? Maybe I backfired.
Through the chair to all the committee, I do know that they looked at, or they thought about replacement of that vehicle a couple of times, and it just kept on moving down the line. You'll see that the odometer reading was only 159. So, you know, it was thought that it still had some life left in it, which is probably why it got pushed off, and then all of a sudden it had a frame failure due to rust that's unrepairable. So it did spring up on us, but yes, this policy would prevent that, because we would be trying to move that instead of trying to get that many additional years out of the unit.
Thank you.
Counselor Nelson.
I'll start another conversation. So I'll seek a similar consensus and we'll kind of go from there. So direct administration of the fleet policy include the option of purchasing used or refurbished as non-exceptions. And I would look to administration to tidy that one up when they bring this back to us. If I can speak to it, so in 5.7.1, it said fleet assets should be purchased new. So the default is new, and it would be an exception to go with used and refurbished. I am all about new when it comes to, you know, a garbage truck. But we have significant issues with having really old vehicles with really low kilometers. And if we have the opportunity to add a 40% discount, buy a year-old vehicle with 20K on it, that we're still gonna age out before we kilometer out. I would love that to be something that we look at, because there could be a significant savings involved. There could also be risk involved in warranties and all of that stuff, but I would like administration to be openly looking at user refurbished, and not have to justify it over new. I think you should be looking at those things in two columns and deciding what makes the most sense. And it really ties back to the mayor's comments about we got to find a way to pay for it. And so there's going to be probably 90% of the time that buying new is the right thing to do. But I believe that admin should be empowered to also look at used as a default, not just an exception.
Director McLaughlin.
Through the chair to all the committee, just some things to think about when you do that. We do have a few examples where buying used has come back to bite us. So when we drafted that particular clause that you're looking at, we were looking at, well, where should the decision rest when to buy used? And when we do procurement in the town, sometimes lots of times it is through us, but in other times the only individual departments take that on. And we just want to make sure that when the decision to actually buy used is made, it's actually thought about, and the risks and the depreciation and all those things to try and prevent some of those mistakes moving forward. So we addressed it in here and thought it should rest where we put it. But if you want to change that, I still think that it should be pushed to the right level of authority in making that decision.
Yeah, if I respond, however it needs to work. But so a lot of our peers encourage late model purchases because it's a cost savings thing. And I don't wanna go as far as encouraging it, but I think it being, so if we're saying it should be new, if you're reading the policy. It should be new unless for whatever, like, I just want it to be, I want the policy to consider it regularly, not as, we can't find it quick enough, so we'll get used because we're in a hurry, right? That's an exception, so, I just like having that option on the table as a council, because it might be the only way we can afford to keep the fleet that we have.
I will be speaking in favor of this. I think, we trust you guys. And if we were a business and we were all looking at that, we would have that consideration and given you know what you're talking about, that you figure out what level it's gotta go to and whoever approves a used vehicle. But when a pickup costs 90 grand, I think that warrants some consideration. And I mean, listen, you're talking to a guy who always drives used vehicles and had pretty good luck with them.
You're talking to a girl that never drives used vehicles. For myself, I generally support this, but I think more for me, if the understanding of it is that I like the concept, and there is some things out there, maybe you get a demo skid steer that was driven around the parking lot, or, you know, something to that effect, right? But I think if that administration's coming back, that they're including some wording around the option, like the wording around those that, you know, internally, you guys are gonna come back with a solution saying, this is how we think this could work, this is how we think those approval levels could layer out. I think in general, I'm good with that, because I do think, especially in the world of equipment and things like that, I think there could be some pretty easy wins out there. And again, you know, just encouraging people to take that little bit of time to take that second look before hitting the accept button. Councilor LePage?
Yeah, I don't support it. But unfortunately, we have put these word in as common sense. I expect the director of the fleet to bring back all our options, right? Say, listen, we can get a good secondhand one, or we can get a good used one, or no, there's nothing good out there on the market and stuff. I just think that's your job, right? I don't think we have to write it into policies, right? That's unfortunate, and we have to, right? Right? But, you know, seriously, right? Common sense says, we hire these people, do the job, they bring the options to us, and say, these are the best options that we have, frankly, right?
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think that's where the policy empowers administration to bring recommendations. But it should also mean that instead of going line by line on the spreadsheet saying, and did you consider a late model or used on this? Like, if we get the policy right, then what's coming back to us, like this, all the stuff after the policy is a result of no policy. When we give clear direction on the policy, then what comes back to us at budget time or in these OBCs, that stuff will be addressed. Like, these guys are doing what we ask, and if we don't, you know, and not every municipality has good fleet replacement policies. This is something that we're doing because I would say our policy is way better than all the other ones, even though it's still in draft. But we need to make sure that it still reflects what the community is looking for. Because in a municipal corporation, I'm buying new all day long. If I had a business, I would buy new all day long, but I want them to look at that because that's the reality of the community right now. So I think empowering them with some guidance is, I just don't want it to be construed that we don't trust administration by going through this. Like, this is exactly, I'm excited these guys have brought this and seeing where it goes.
Councilor Dunn?
Could we just make something simple if we were looking at making a change and just saying fleet assets should be purchased new, however, when considering used or refurbished equipment, the following should be taken into consideration. So it kind of covers off both, like we're looking at new, however, we will look at used.
I think that the consensus is broad enough that administration will bring back their recommendation where they see it fitting and what that looks like, and then we would vote on it at that time. There could be a few different places it would go into. Is say no, do you understand? Go ahead.
So you would be coming to administration? So you would be coming back to us every time you purchase a vehicle?
No, they'd be bringing back in the policy for us to review where they put it in the. Like, they'll bring the policy back with these.
Oh, okay, gotcha, okay.
Yeah, we'll look at the policy.
Okay.
of the vehicles.
That's what I thought.
All right.
Okay.
So in the interest of time, I think we all understand what this is. If administration understands the intent, then I think there's no reason we shouldn't call this to question. That committee direct administration to include the option of purchasing used or refurbished as non-exceptions. And please vote now. That's carried unanimously. Ready?
One of the other pieces, I know everyone around this table and the last table and every citizen talks a lot about grants. And within transportation, one of the main areas for grants is around climate emissions and electrification. And I think it is my belief that our policy should have some sort of reference to, I don't know if we need to have a climate and electrification strategy, but I think we should, in there somewhere, make sure that admin can look at in 10 years, a hydrogen bus versus a gas bus. If the technology is proven and we can go get a grant to cover that entire bus versus spending $450,000 on a big old diesel. So I guess the community directed administration to that the fleet replacement policy reflect exploring grant opportunities related to climate emissions and electrification. And this is one where I really look at it to figure out what that wording needs to look like. I know, yeah, there may be really good grants available. I don't want them to go chase today a hydrogen bus, but in 5 years I might want you guys to have the tools to go get a grant to get a hydrogen bus because it's been shown to do X, Y, and Z, and there's, we're not the bleeding edge, but we're potentially ahead of the curve.
Yeah, thank you. Doesn't, I don't have the First Amendment item in front of me, but didn't that talk about that new technology going down that road? Doesn't that give us the tools that we need, or give administration tools they need to capture that? If there's new technology out there that you can explore that, and that means applying for a grant or whatever, right? But I think the First Amendment, right, of this policy maybe gives us the tools that we need.
I tend to agree. I bring these sort of little nuggets down inside of policies. I would just as soon, if that got to be an option, then investigate what policies might be impacted by that consideration. I think sometimes you can give so many words in so much direction that it sort of hamstrings anyhow. So this is one that I'm not gonna support, like Councilor McLean said. I think it's covered in the first amendment we talked about, so.
Councilor Charlton.
Is it okay if I ask Councillor Nelson, was your intent different than what Councillor McLean and Mayor Barge?
Yeah, so the initial one talks about technology and it's more operational. Emissions don't currently really cost us anything, but they might. Understand a lot of those grants will ask, what is your community doing to be more sustainable and do all those things? We no longer have community sustainability plan. I don't believe we have any sort of emissions reduction strategy. Like we don't have really anything in place saying that we're looking to do many of those things. And so if we're, in 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is, we're applying for something that reduces emissions and it's not tied to anything. I also think if it's not necessarily technological, to me, those two things are separate and they're looked at separately. One is more around innovation and one is more around sustainability, climate and emissions. So I see them as different, but I also fully understand how, that technological advancement could also totally cover it. So I'm putting things up to see where they go and I'm not, I think this is enough different and it makes sense, but I also not gonna get brokenhearted if one gets voted down, so.
Councillor McDonald and myself.
I have to agree with Councillor. Here as well, because Nelson, I'm sorry, because, we need to have options here. Moving forward, and I think having these energy efficient options to look at as well is gonna be saving the taxpayers at the end. So I'll be in agreement with this.
For myself, I won't be in agreement with this. I don't believe this is the place for it. I think that, we went through with the last council, that whole, should we have electric buses meeting and whatever that whole thing was, I think there's things that come out, but generally when there's large grants, there's large investments, there's large things, they're gonna be coming at you from a very different angle as a municipality versus through a fleet management paperwork side of things. So it would be, here's this, but your town is going to have a sustainability plan as part of that plan or this study or whatever they're gonna make you do, then an outcome would be looking at something like this. So I feel like I support the intent of it and the innovation and all of those things, but I don't believe that tasking that department with grants and innovations on large scales of turning all the buses to hydrogen or whatever that, as an example, I just don't know if that's the right fit. Because generally those things come from a big broad study, which then will allocate money into all these different pots and different things that you're doing to do whatever. So I won't support this just because I don't think it's the right spot for it. And I do agree that I think the intent in the original amendment would say, okay, should you get an electric car or a hybrid something versus whatever for that general purpose? I think one by one, you should be looking at those things, but I think that broad stuff is gonna come out of a much larger conversation of the intent of the community, not the fleet policy. So that's my thoughts. Any other questions before we call this to question? So right now, it's at committee direct administration to set the fleet replacement policy to reflect exploring grant opportunities, reflecting emission reduction. You had some more words at the end of that.
The grant,
Reflecting emission reduction.
so, yeah, electrification is so reflecting emission reduction and electrification. Which is now, electrification is more talked about now than anything else.
So I will review that one more time, that committee direct administration to set the fleet replacement policy to reflect exploring grant opportunities, reflecting emission reduction and electrification. You're happy with that wording, Councilor?
Sure.
Okay. All right, please vote now.
You
Just now have to vote my hand, I don't know what I did.
In favor or against?
Against.
Against?
it's me.
Go. Motion is defeated with Councillor Chambers, Laberge, McLean, Dunn, and Charlton against. All right, ready.
So I have one not direction, don't worry, Jen. I have more of a comment or a question because it's not an area that I understand nearly well enough. One of the things that, quite a few municipalities refer to is, within their emergency vehicle life cycle, they talk about frontline, reserve, and extended life. And so something that maybe, in the future might be something that, you know, distinguishing those. And then I think the reason they do that is saying, okay, well, if it's a reserve, we'll treat it differently when it comes to, you know, total costs and when it gets replaced versus frontline saying, okay, if this is frontline, it needs to be this, so, and if it's in there, I just kind of missed it, but, that's just a general comment.
To the chair of the committee, I think it's covered in 4.4. If you're gonna give a read and just tell me if it's covered in there.
Yeah, so frontline apparatus, is recommended for replacement between 15 and 20 years. And, essentially second line apparatus, would be extended to the 25-year mark as per NFPA recommendations.
That's for, if I'm reading, that's for frontline.
Yeah.
So after either 20, it just, I didn't understand it well enough.
Yeah, so the second, the emergency reserve would be considered the second line apparatus, which would be held on to up until 25 years as per NFPA standards.
I think we're just missing words
Yeah.
after the word service.
Right.
Yeah, I don't see the second line.
I've got it circled with a question mark, because it just, the sentence kind of stops there.
No additions to note in that?
Yeah.
Councillor Nolvis?
Sheepishly, so at a really high level, 6.2 worries me a little bit. We spend a lot of time working on a policy and all of these guidelines, and then it seems like the deviations are incredibly broad. If we can make deviations on frequency use, conditions, environments, reliability, frequency, condition, like it just seems so broad that if administration brought back something, they could tie it to, well, we're bringing this back out of cycle or out of policy because of frequency of use. Like it almost, this feels like it undermines all of the work that you guys have done with the policy, because literally you can do anything and tie it to just about anything. It's a page of exceptions to the rule is, it just seems to take away from the policy itself.
Sarah?
Thank you through the chair. You're right, it is a broad list of exceptions, but you do have to allow the flexibility, and I think that, you know, as council, I don't think it would be acceptable to come forward and say, well, we want this earlier because of the frequency of use. I think that in cases of deviation, it has to be, you know, there should be, you know, a specific case made for that particular one. You know, we talk about the lemon example. You know, when we have a fleet of this size, there's always going to be a lemon somewhere in there. And so coming forward early and, we should be providing that case to council to say, you know, this, say pickup truck, you know, it's not due for another 5 years, but we're having a ton of problems with it. It's always down. We're spending a lot, and you're just making sure, because, you know, you can set the guidelines, but there's always going to need to be that human interaction with a fleet of this size, because there's always going to be exceptions. So, you know, that has to be proven, and justified to council. And if council doesn't buy it, then we don't. Or if council doesn't, agree with the analysis, then we don't move forward with it. But I think it's important to make sure that we have flexibility built in with the policy.
Next last question, and I'll go to you. I'll put myself in queue.
You can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor.
Last one. My only concern in 6.2 when I read it, but you might have just answered it, CAO, so I just wanted to clarify quickly. I thought it was kind of odd that the deviation would only be determined by the operations manager, but is it the operations manager that is identifying that there would be the deviation, and then it would be coming to council still to make that decision, or does there need to be another? Cause it kind of reads to me like the operations manager can just decide that it's a deviation and we can't really do much about it, but what would that process be?
No, so, through the chair, so the operations manager, the person who's, you know, has the most interaction would be flagging that. They would be developing a CPP when it comes to, or as a part of our fleet replacement schedule for our capital budget. But that still has to be approved by, through the budget process. So there's no, you know, there's no unilateral authority that council can provide, for budget in a policy. So it has to be approved through the budget, or if it's not approved through budget, then just elsewhere by council.
I think the way it's written, the operation manager would be able to extend the life of something because it's underutilized, those kind of things. They're not expending any town funds by doing that. You're seeing the entire 5 list come to you at budget time. But if he's accelerating the replacement and therefore costing money, then that obviously is going to be a specific request to you at budget.
Yeah, I think as long as the deviations have a relatively high bar, I don't wanna have things come back to council and be like, okay, that's not. You know, I don't agree with you wanting to replace it. I wanna do work on this plus, so when you bring stuff, it's like rubber stamp because it fits in with this and it is a high bar for deviation. So I'll be looking forward to kind of seeing how this works in practice, because it's a brand new policy, so.
Right.
Extremely sheepishly. So one of the things, 6.2.5, it talks about utilizing like vehicles once they're through their life cycle and we're saying we're not using them anymore, we can still continue using them and transfer them to departments and do different things. If a vehicle that's beyond its life cycle for one use gets transferred to use as a FCSS transport vehicle, what happens when it's no longer good enough for FCSS to use and they've gotten used to using it? Does it become part of the fleet that now is something that we need to worry about? Like if somebody builds a boardwalk at Maxwell Lake, and that's now something that has come to be an expectation of use, now is it our responsibility to, like, is there any way to make the fleet bigger by having that extra vehicle used for something else?
Sure.
Through the chair to committee, this clause in this policy here essentially gives the administration the flexibility to, I'll give an example here, a fire rescue command truck, for example, a light duty pickup would be suitable to be deployed to a wildfire during the wildfire season, up to a certain mileage. It might not be as reliable to send on a 12-15 hour journey up north to the Yukon or the northern Alberta or wherever they might be deployed, but it might still be perfectly usable within town. So the extended life cycle, like they might need to replace their vehicle at say 10 years to be able to maintain that level of service, but we might be able to shuffle that to say public works or into the parks department and get that 5 years out of that while not increasing the size of our fleet. We're still maintaining the same size. We're just trying to extend that life cycle and maximize the usability of that vehicle until we offload it.
So if I could just be clear, so at no point will it be an additional vehicle on our fleet?
The way that it's worded here, it would not, it would not do that, no.
So I've, go ahead, I have a couple other questions.
But wouldn't it go on a spreadsheet? And then you'd have to consider for it. And I think the answer is yes, but if we need a vehicle to do that, don't we need a vehicle to do that? Like, I don't think the policy should be, to try and find a way to have as few vehicles as we possibly can. But it's to have vehicles we need to do the things we want to do. So again, I think the answer to your question is yes, but if we need a vehicle there and we don't have to buy a new one, then I'm good with it.
So if I could, so I agree with that. If we can move it from a fire vehicle to a parks vehicle.
100%.
My concern is if we have it as a fire vehicle, but it can no longer travel 2 hours or 12 hours, and we need to buy a replacement, then it becomes a fire vehicle to only use in town and now becomes part of the fleet. And then when it comes to end of life, then is the expectation that we are now going to replace it, or if the public hears, oh, we got rid of a firefighting pickup truck, that it could create some challenges because it would be seen as a reduction in the level of service because we're getting rid of another vehicle. Oh, perfect. Sorry.
Everybody wants.
Must be a bad question or a good question.
Director McLaughlin might have the same thing, but I'm having trouble finding it in the policy, but it is a part of the policy. We talk about increasing the size of fleet. And that scenario where we're moving one, replacing it, not selling that old, the old one. And then when that comes time to be replaced, you're replacing that with the new one. It's kind of the scenario you're talking about. So just your fleet grows and grows, but we have it in here. I don't know exactly where it is, but I have read it. Director McLaughlin might know, but we don't increase the size of.
It is 5.9, and we made it very clear that to keep a town asset that was replaced would stick with the CAO. So that you don't have that happening. It might make sense in the rare circumstance, but you have to be very cautious of growing your fleet through keeping the old one.
And we just went through this at budget time around the garbage truck, right? Where we had to make a decision, are we gonna get rid of it, are we gonna park it and store it, but that didn't. There was in no way we're gonna have two garbage trucks, right? When that one decided not to start, then we were gonna go buy a new one to replace the one that was parked, right? So.
Never say never.
Yeah. So if I could, I'm gonna give this one some more thought. I think maybe some wording that says any retained vehicle will not become part of the permanent fleet and will not be replaced, and have that spelled out. So it is, we have a redundant garbage truck. If we use it a couple times a year, now when it is fully dead, like, well, we did use it a bit, like, you can kind of get used to having something. It's kind of like having a really big closet, you fill it up and it's hard to empty it again. So, and this closet is a very expensive closet for the town of Hinton, so thank you.
Could always become a rental vehicle, like we got for medicine.
It works, it's a good revenue source for fire vehicles, so.
Okay. Council. Council.
It is, so, on page 63, there's 7.1.4 and it's just blank. I just want to make sure we're not, it's not just something.
What's blank?
It's just like, it's on the top of the page, 7.1.4 is just, just
Oh, I see.
want to make sure we aren't missing a, policy lines.
Just a typo.
Perfect.
Council. Councilor Smith.
So many questions.
Are you done?
Yes. For now.
I'd like to see consensus that we move, fleet replacement policy number 3201 as amended to the next regular council meeting.
Maybe the whole meeting,
Or
because we're gonna get new language. I think we should have a look at it.
okay, maybe all five.
This year we want next, just based on how long it takes and what the.
Well, future, sorry. Okay.
Because there's no huge
No.
time,
Yeah, no,
this needs to be in place for later.
Councilor Smith.
yeah, I just apologize. Well, I'll catch on to the. Wow, it works.
All right, is there any further discussion? Before we call this to question, everybody's comfortable with. Presented, it'll come back, we can reread it and spend some more time thinking on it. All right, that I will call the question that committee direct administration to bring the fleet replacement policy IN 3201 to a future committee of the whole meeting as amended. If I can just say it's nice to read it, nice to review it, nice to feel like you kind of have an idea of where we're going. I think we've come a long way in it, so appreciate the full work that was put into this for us and looking forward to continuing to work ahead with getting where we'll need it to be. So I will call that to question now. Please vote now. And Councillor Charlton in favor?
Favor.
Thanks for your latitude on that one, guys. It was, like, I really, really like the policy, so,
We knew you
Thank
were
you.
gonna be excited. I was ready.
I'm gonna say thank you.
No, that's good.
Before we move to the next topic, I just noticed my nose was getting a little shiny. What's the motion if I gotta go powder my nose?
Oh, that we would. Put privilege?
Point privilege. 7-minute break.
Non-debatable.
7-minute break. We're only 7-minute break.